but I just want to jump in like Spock and like talk to the whales.
Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 84, recorded July 2023. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we interview a Trekkie. We do a level 5 diagnostic on their fandom, and we try to figure out why we all love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 84. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com, that's the email, or on Facebook, Twitter, or Blue Sky, @TrekProfiles. Here is my spoiler warning. Any episode of my show can talk about any episode of the Star Trek at any time. You have been warned, humans. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the coolly chaotic, characteristically circumspect, yet cheerfully clinical M5 Multitronic Unit. Say hello, M5.
M5 ready.
Let's do the announcements.
Announcements displayed.
This is an independent podcast. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is just to follow us wherever you're getting your audio. We are on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. We do not accept your financial support here at Trek Profiles. We don't take any sort of money for the show. We don't run ads. We don't have a supporters program or anything like that. But what we do is if you want to support us financially, the best way to do that is just to donate to our official charity here on the show. That's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. And over at trekprofiles.com/donate, there will be a link that you can use there to donate directly to the charity. Thank you for considering it. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of the episode. It'll come after the ending audio cards. And we have something a little different for you in the bonus content in this one. While we were doing the recording with my guest, we learned that she had just seen the short treks for the very first time. And she didn't know about the Tribble ad at the end of The Trouble with Edward. So I asked her to go back, watch that, and send me her thoughts in an audio comment, which she did. So that comment with her thoughts on the Tribble ad will be the first part of the bonus content in this one. So if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. Okay, at the end of every episode, my guest faces my Kobayashi Maru lightning round. They get 5 terrible multiple-choice Star Trek questions, and they must give us their answer. After each episode drops, I tweet those questions out as polls, where you can have your say. So let's look at the questions from episode 82 with Jamie McGregor and see how it went. Pick the vacation planet of your choice. Casperia Prime, Argelius, or Free Cloud/Stardust City, or the Shoreleaf planet from TOS. Both my guest and the poll people preferred the TOS Shoreleaf planet. It got 48% of the vote, with Casperia Prime getting 28, Stardust City, my favorite, getting 21, and Argelius only got 2. Who is the best Parisi Squares player? Raymond Marr, Makoto Archo, or Ensign Bristow? All 3 of those were mentioned in the show as players, by the way. My guest said Ensign Bristow, and he was also the choice online with 45%. Coming up in a tight second place was Makoto Archo with 44%, and Ray Marr only got 11%. Where's your hiding spot on the 1701D, the Port Nacelle Pylon Catwalk, the Jeffries Tube, or Cetacean Ops? My guest and the online poll people were aligned with Cetacean Ops. They got 44%, and in the poll, the Jeffries Tube got 41%, and the Catwalk only 15%. Which of these is the wildest alien from the animated series? The Score, the Capellan Power Cats, or the Pandronians? My guest said the Power Cats were supreme, and Twitter agreed with a 46% margin. The Pandronians only got 31%, and the bird-like Score only got 23%. And finally, who are you jamming with? Picard and his flute, Harry and his clarinet, or Riker and his trombone? Jamie was all about that clarinet, but Riker maneuvered his way to the top of the poll with a 67% result. Picard got 24%, and Harry, like almost always, was left at the end with only 9%. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, you can send them to me via email at feedback@trekprofiles.com or DM me on Twitter. That's it for announcements and housekeeping. Let's get to it. M5, start the show.
Commencing transmission.
Her favorite Federation man is Spock, but her favorite alien is that plain and simple Taylor Garrick. The only ship for her is the OG-1701. She's from the Netherlands, Europe, Earth, and Sector 001. It's the crime thriller author, cosplayer, TikTok personality, and all-around Star Trek fan. Welcome, Karin, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is time for question one. Are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, how I discovered that you were a Star Trek fan is that a few months ago, I made a probably foolish decision and installed TikTok and got an account and started following some random accounts. And TikTok rapidly discovered that I was very much enjoying Star Trek. And so you were one of the first things that it decided to show me, and all of your very elaborate cosplays. So tell me what's going on here with how did all of this happen? How did we suddenly get Karin, the Star Trek TikTok cosplayer who likes to sing along to various things? So tell me what's going on here with this.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I joined TikTok during the pandemic because I wasn't able to leave my house. Here in the Netherlands, we were in lockdown for almost a full year. And we had this rule that people had to designate a person in their household who was allowed to do the groceries and basically leave the house, and everybody else could only leave their house for an hour a day to go for a walk. And I was not chosen as the grocery person. So I was spending a lot of time at home, and I just thought, you know what? I hear about this TikTok. Everybody seems to be having a lot of fun on there. And so I joined it. I was always into cosplay, but not really publicly into cosplay. I mean, people that I knew that I did it, but I'd never been to conventions before or anything. And I just found this group of amazing Star Trek cosplayers on there. I was nervous at first because some of them were just fantastic. And then I thought, you know what? Why not? Dove in head first. And yeah, now Star Trek has been kind of my cosplay TikTok thing.
Now, for people who've not seen this stuff, I just want to say that your cosplays are not just a cosplay. I mean, you are doing makeup, you're doing hair, you have the full-on costumes. You know, it's not like, thrifty stuff you made at home. In a lot of cases, it looks like stuff you bought or got from somewhere. You have good lighting. I mean, it's a production you're making for like a 30-second video. So I imagine that there's a lot of prep involved in putting on one of these things.
It is. I mean, some of the costumes are a little bit more difficult than others. My Spock cosplay, for example, in the beginning, it took me almost an hour to do the eyebrows. I've gotten that down to 15 minutes, so that's a little bit better. But yes, some of those cosplays do take quite a lot of time, drawing trill spots. That's not easy to do it and make it match on both sides. But yeah, it's fun. It is kind of like your own little production in your bedroom or something, which is where I film mine in the corner. But yeah, some of the things are handmade. My Vulcan harp is handmade from an IKEA shelf that I just kind of took apart, sawed, and painted. And but yeah, a lot of the cosplays I have purchased. I used to make them back in the day, but I don't have time for that now. So
the one thing I do note, though, is that it's always hard when looking at TikToks to tell sort of the dates of these things, because I think it doesn't show me dates a lot of times.
No, it doesn't.
But it seems like you're making an awful lot of these things.
I do. What I try to do is, because you see, like you said, a lot of those cosplays take a lot of time to get into, especially if it's something that requires a lot of makeup, like 7 of 9, for example. If I'm going to glue some Borg prosthetics to my face, then I'm going to keep them on for as long as possible. So whenever I film something, I usually pick one day out of the week and I say, okay, this is going to be 7 of 9 day. And I just try to film as much as possible. So I just have a large batch of videos that I can push out. So I think right now I probably have about 300 just sitting in my drafts that range everywhere from Deep Space Nine to the original series to Voyager.
And that's not even all. I should mention you're doing Indiana Jones. You're doing, I think I saw a Doctor Who at one point.
Yeah, I started actually. It's funny because people are always asking me why is your username Jazzercise Loki, and it's because if you scroll way back to the beginning, I actually started doing Marvel cosplays, and I did like jazzercise videos, actual like workout videos. And a lot of people have asked me, can you make Star Trek workout videos? But there's already another cosplayer who does Star Trek jazzercise videos, so I don't want to step on her territory. But yeah, if you scroll back really far, you'll see a lot of old Marvel cosplays, and yeah, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, all the things that inspire me.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's just I'm always in awe of it because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
I have a sense of how much is involved, so I have a lot of respect for that.
But the funny thing is actually I didn't have much of a following at all until I started showing the Star Trek cosplays, and then I started getting hundreds and then thousands of people following me just for the Star Trek. I think in one day alone I got 500 followers, mostly from Germany, which I thought was interesting, just for my Jadzia Dax cosplay. And the fun thing about the Star Trek community on TikTok that I didn't get from some of the other communities, like the Marvel community, is that the Star Trek community actually interacts with you. They're really excited. They want to talk to you not only about your cosplays, but they want to talk to you about your thoughts on the shows, your thoughts on the characters, on the future of Trek, on the science of Trek. And so the cool thing about the Star Trek TikTok community or the Trek Talk community is that you can have this, behind the scenes relationship with people, and it feels like real time. And
they invite you on podcasts.
Yeah, that too.
Never trust those people, by the way. They're terrible. So I'm gonna put a link here. If I was going to recommend one of your TikToks, and I haven't seen them all by any means, but I think we have to point people to the famous hoisin sauce video.
That was one of my favorites, actually. That was and it didn't get a lot of views, I think, but that was definitely one of my favorites. My other favorite is my TOS Spock playing the harp to the Bilbo and singing the Bilbo Baggins song that Leonard Nimoy sang.
So would you explain the background of the hoisin sauce? Like what is the origin of this?
There was a TikTok that went viral, and it was I believe he's an actual comedian, and he had an obsession with hoisin sauce, and so he made this song where he would go to the fridge, open the door, pulls out a bottle of hoisin sauce, and then he keeps doing it because his cupboard is just full of hoisin sauce. So I did kind of a mock of that same video, except I went to my closet and I just keep pulling out Star Trek uniforms to the point of I'm holding, I think I'm holding about 15 in my arms by the time the video was over, which is not all of my Star Trek cosplays. I couldn't hold all of them. I tried to. They were too heavy.
That's amazing. So, yeah, we will put links up to both of those, to the hoisin sauce and to the Bilbo Baggins Mr. Spock one. And by the way, the Vulcan harp that you have is A+. That is very, very good. I did not realize that was something you had made. Yeah. It looked like something that you had bought. It's a fun project. Looks really good.
It was a fun project. I get a lot of questions about it. A lot of people asking me if it's a real harp, which I feel like, thank you that you think it looks that good, because I can see all of the imperfections on the back that nobody sees in the videos. But yeah, it was definitely a homemade project. I went to IKEA. IKEA always has this like little shelf area of excess wood that they can't sell because it came to something that's broken or they don't have anymore, and you can just take it for free. And so I found like a piece of an old shelf, just brought it home, sawed it out. You can find the actual detailed anatomy, so to speak, of the Vulcan harp from one of the old books online. I just printed out that, cut it around it, and yeah.
Oh, good on you for being crafty. I appreciate that. I am not, so I always appreciate people who are. So walk me through how we get from young girl growing up in the United States to becoming a Star Trek fan, to becoming a Star Trek TikToker and crime author, yeah. Scandinavian noir author. How did all of this happen? So when did you start watching Star Trek? Was that over here or was that in the Netherlands?
So I started watching Star Trek in the United States. Actually, my first experience with Star Trek was almost my last experience with Star Trek.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So kind of backstory here. My mom was very strict about what I was allowed to watch when I was a child, when I was growing up. But for some reason, she had this very strange rule that if Harrison Ford was in it, then it was safe to watch. It was okay.
Okay.
So at very young age, I was watching Indiana Jones, and then I was getting into Star Wars, and I finished Star Wars and to the point of the VHS was basically run out. And I said to my mom, I want to watch something else that's like Star Wars, but obviously not Star Wars because I've seen it 15,000 times. And my mom, she was like, bless her, she thought, well, I do remember Star Trek in the 60s because that was like at the time when she was growing up watching TV. And she's like, I remember Star Trek. And she's like, well, Star Wars, Star Trek, I think it's the same thing. She couldn't really remember. It had been so many years since she'd seen it.
Oh my God.
I think I was about 7 or 8. And so she goes to like the Blockbuster and she says, I want Star Trek. She gets the motion picture.
Oh, goodness.
That's basically all you could find back then was the old movies on VHS. You couldn't find the TV
Karin,
shows.
I think we have to explain for the Utes what a Blockbuster is.
Yeah. So it's a store where you can go and you can rent movies for an absurd price. It was like $3.99 for a new release. And then you could only watch it for like 2 days. And so then you'd bring it home and then you'd watch it. And you'd have to rewind it before you returned it, or you could sometimes get a charge.
Be kind, rewind.
Exactly. So she goes to the Blockbuster, she gets the motion picture, she brings it home. She's like, this is just like Star Wars, but Harrison Ford's not in it. So I'm kind of like, oh, I'm allowed to watch it? Like, cool. Like, and she puts it on, and I think probably within 15 minutes, I fell asleep. And then I woke up, the movie is still playing, and I remember thinking it looked the same. Like, I remember I fell asleep probably when they went to warp. It was kind of blue. I woke up. I think they were probably still at warp. It was blue. There was a lot of blue, a lot of like gray tones. And I was like, this is not Star Wars, Mom. This is not. No, I just didn't get it. I was just too young. Like I said, I was probably 7, maybe 8. And it didn't really click with me. I didn't really understand it. Now, of course, I think the motion picture is probably one of my favorites because I like the philosophical, artistic aspect of it.
Me too. We are big defenders of motion picture up in here. We love motion picture, but I completely understand it's not the movie for a 7-year-old.
No. So I then just didn't watch Star Trek. I think maybe I had caught a few episodes on TV, but I didn't really get it. And then when I think I was 12, my parents divorced and we moved to another state, and I was born in a military family, so I was used to moving a lot. But now that my parents were divorced, it was kind of told to me this is going to be a permanent move. So now you have to like go to school, you have to make friends. They have to be permanent friends because we're going to be here for a while. And we went to this new school, and I was coming from the West Coast where elementary school went up through 6th grade. And we moved to Ohio where elementary school ended in the 5th grade. So everybody that was in my 7th grade class had already been at middle school for a year. So everybody was a little bit older than me, kind of emotionally older than me. And I just was having trouble making friends. And so about 5 months into the school year, I like faked sick because I didn't want to go to school.
Oh, no.
And my mom knew I was faking. And she was like, well, let's go to the movies. And the only thing that was playing was Star Trek Insurrection.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, I know people have a lot of beef with Star Trek Insurrection, but Star Trek Insurrection is the one that got me back into Star Trek because we went and saw that movie. I really connected with it. And when I went back to school the next week or something, I kind of went back to school with this like new vigor of, okay, I'm going to try to find friends who like this kind of stuff. I really connected with Data in that movie because he was also kind of like me, kind of like floundering on friendship and where he belonged with the crew. And it was one of the funnier movies. So, it connected with me a little bit more than the motion picture at the time. And then I went back to school and met other people that were also closeted Trek nerds.
Delightful.
And then that's how Star Trek happened. And then the cosplaying came a little bit later, but that's where it started.
What was the first cosplay you ever put on?
My first Star Trek cosplay was actually, so my mom was a seamstress when she was younger. So she was very good at making clothes. So when I was younger, she made all of my Halloween costumes for me. So I was actually kind of known.
Nice.
I was actually known in school for being, the girl with the really elaborate Halloween costumes. And when I finally got back into Star Trek and I was really into it now, she helped me make Lieutenant Uhura's TOS uniform, the red dress. And we made it from if you know anything about sewing, we made it from a simplicity pattern that was like meant for an ice skater.
Oh dear.
Ice skating pattern. We just didn't use the ice skating fabric. It works fine. So that was the first one I had. And then, which I still have, although it's kind of in rough shape because it's pretty old. And then we made a blue TOS dress so that I could be, like a female version of Spock. And that one I still have. Yeah. So those are my first 2 Star Trek ones.
When I was in elementary school, I'm going to date myself very clearly by this story. The cool thing to have was Atari 2600 cartridges.
Oh, wow.
And you had to trade them with your friends.
Oh.
And I was by far the least popular kid in class, like by a lot. But one day I was the one that had the Pitfall game. And when I came to school and I had the box to show that I had the Pitfall game, all of a sudden I was very popular for a week until everyone else could get it. Actually, it probably took a lot longer back then. But yeah, we had to trade the cartridges with each other to play different games. So
it's funny.
You'd be lucky to get it for 3 days.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually would wonder, I'd like to ask somebody who's like in high school now, like, is it cool to be a nerd now? Because it seems like it's cool to be a nerd. Like you see things on TikTok and you think, oh, nerddom is like the new like cool crowd. But like when I was like in middle school and high school, it wasn't cool to like Star Trek.
No.
Like you could like Star Wars, but you couldn't like Star Trek. And so I actually had a group of friends that I'm still close with some of them, but we all connected because we were sci-fi nerds, but we only ever talked about our love for Star Wars. We never like admitted Star Trek was something that we loved, and I always thought I was the only one that liked it. And so I was like, because every time I'd bring up, oh, I love Insurrection, everybody'd be like, oh, nobody loves Insurrection. Like, you only like Insurrection because you're a girl. Come to find out years later, after we've graduated high school, that all of those guys that were in my nerd friend group were actually closeted Star Trek nerds. They loved Star Trek more than Star Wars, but they just weren't comfortable admitting to everybody else, even our best friends, that they love Star Trek. And so I remember going to one of their houses once, and he had multiple models of the Enterprise hanging up in his room. And I was like, wait a second. You've got 5 Enterprises and 1 Millennium Falcon. I think you're a Star Trek fan. So we were all kind of deceiving each other and deceiving ourselves. And now we're all
I'm detecting a sensor anomaly.
Yeah, exactly.
Sensors have determined that your love of Star Wars is in fact a lie.
It is.
You're a Trekkie.
It is.
That's glorious. But I want to point out there's absolutely nothing wrong with Star Trek Insurrection. And for those who can't remember, that's the one that's all about Picard getting thirsty for Baku villagers.
Yes.
So there you go.
But that was funny because, and actually that has one of my favorite Picard moments ever is
tell me
him doing that little salsa dance in his like office before he goes out.
Yeah.
See, I just remember thinking as a kid, like, that's like, can he do that? Is that what you do when you're on a spaceship? Like you do a salsa dance? Like, I was like, well, that's something I've never seen before in sci-fi. So I'm like, okay. And then it has that scene where, Data is a flotation device, which, I mean, the movie, like the plot has its problems, but it's funny. And if you're a young person trying to get into Trek, it's not a bad starting place.
I'm surprised now that I think about it, how many times I've heard on this show the story of my parents were very strict. They wouldn't let us watch a lot of things, and they would let me watch Star Trek, and I became a Star Trek nerd. I don't know what it is, but I have heard that line on this show many, many, many times. And it's just interesting to me. I haven't quite figured out what it means yet or why this is so common, but I do observe it quite a bit. Very strange.
It's a pity that Harrison Ford wasn't in any of the Star Trek episodes, because then I would have been able to get my mom full on involved with it as well.
So you started with the motion picture.
Yes.
Then you watched Insurrection.
Yes.
And then what happened?
So then
did you what series did you go to next?
So then it was still a kind of a time period where you couldn't get the actual series on video. So you could only see what was airing at the time. I think what was airing at the time was probably early DS9, I think.
Okay.
It would have been like 97, 98. Oh, yeah. And so I actually went back and watched the TOS movies at that point, skipped the motion picture and just started with Wrath of Khan. And from Wrath of Khan, I was 100% hooked on the TOS crew. Like that was my obsession. I loved that Spock became my favorite character. And I watched all the way up through Insurrection. Then I got to see Nemesis then was in the theaters the next year. And from then I was watching all of the movies. And then eventually, I think sometime in the early 2000s was when everything started coming out on DVD, I think.
Yes.
And that's when I just bulk bought all the DVDs and started from the beginning and went as far as I could.
As we sit here in 2023, is that the current year?
Yes. Time
oh my God. How did that happen? So have you seen it all?
I have seen everything now except for the end of Prodigy. So I've seen the first few episodes of Prodigy, and I just have to see the end of it.
Oh, goodness. And that's really unfortunate
It
because
is.
there is no legal way to see the end of
No,
Prodigy
it
season
is.
1 right now.
It is. So I'm holding out hope that we get a DVD because I would love to introduce it to my nieces because I think that would be great.
So whenever I have on fans outside the United States, I always want to spend a minute just to ask. So you're in the Netherlands. We already said that. How is Star Trek available in your country right now?
So Star Trek is on, I want to say, at least 4 different streaming services. So we have a lot of the old shows, TOS, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, I think are on Netflix. We don't have Paramount Plus here, but we have Sky Showtime. So Sky Showtime has Strange New Worlds, and we have Amazon Prime has Lower Decks, and it did have Prodigy up until a couple weeks ago. I have to check to see if it's still on there, because if it's still on there,
it won't be.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, it won't be on there anymore.
Yeah.
No.
And then
Prodigy got scrubbed.
And then the old films are on. There's like a Dutch version of Netflix that has some of the old films on it.
My goodness gracious.
But for the old stuff, I still for the old films, I recently rebought the DVD box sets for everything, so I would have those. Hopefully Netflix will keep the old series on there for a while. Because I used to own everything on DVD back in the States, but because of different regions, I couldn't bring them over here because I couldn't watch them here.
Because they don't play on your DVD player.
Correct.
That's insane.
Yeah.
This whole thing is insane.
It is insane. Because if you remember, like these seasons of Enterprise, because they came in those fancy boxes, they were like $120 a season.
Yeah, they're spendy. Absolutely.
Yeah, they were very expensive.
Oh my goodness gracious! So you have to subscribe to like 4 or 5 different streaming services to get everything that's available.
Everything that's available, yes, yeah.
Unbelievable. So when new episodes come out, how do you watch it? Is it like a group activity, you and some family, or your partner, or your friends, or is it just you?
It's just me. It's mostly just me. Like Star Trek has been, even though I have friends who are into Star Trek now that weren't when I was younger, Star Trek has always kind of been a personal thing for me. I really enjoy having that alone time with just me and Star Trek, and just kind of being able to watch it without any outside interference or people asking me questions. And then if I have somebody else who wants to watch it, then I will rewatch it with somebody else. Like the new episodes of Strange New Worlds, I have been rewatching with a friend. But I like that first experience to have on my own.
I want to go back to a question that we kind of lost the plot on a little bit. So we talked about the fact that you started watching Star Trek, you got into that, you've seen it all. At what point did you decide to become a Scandinavian crime noir author? And is there any connection at all between your love of Star Trek and your crime fiction? And how has Star Trek, if so, how has Star Trek influenced your writing?
That's a tough question. I mean, Star Trek has 100% influenced my writing in multiple ways. How I became a Scandinavian crime author was kind of an accident, actually. I have been writing for many years, and I had been accepted to an MFA program in the States when I was living in the States for creative writing when I was very young. And I was actually the youngest person that this program had ever accepted, and that made me really nervous for some reason. When they told me that, I was very nervous, and it was something I really loved, I was really passionate about. But then I remember going and talking to my advisor about it at the time, who was my creative writing mentor and professor, and he kind of said to me, you don't go into a field like creative writing because you think it's going to get you work. You go into it because it's your passion. And that scared me so much. I thought, well, I better not do this because I'll never get a job. And then fast forward many years, I think at least over 10 years later, I finally decided, you know what? That was something I'd always regretted not doing. So I found another program that I got into. And I was actually writing sci-fi for the first 2 years of the program. I was writing a lot of sci-fi Westerns. And then the last year of the program, which was the year you're supposed to work on your final thesis, which is either a collection of short stories or the first 100, 150 pages of a novel, somebody very close to me passed away. And when she passed, I found that I just couldn't write those sci-fi Westerns anymore because they had kind of a sardonic humor to them, like kind of a wry, comical aspect to them.
Okay.
And after she passed, I just wasn't feeling very funny. And so in that last semester of school, essentially, I just kind of fell into Scandinavian crime fiction, which is Scandinavian crime fiction was something I'd picked up from my mother's side of the family. My mother's from Sweden, and I had been reading a lot of it before. I actually had a master's in Scandinavian literature.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I thought, you know what, maybe I just try my hand at that, because that is really dark. If you've seen any of the Scandinavian TV shows, they're very dark. It's a lot of just unsettling emotions. And I thought this will be a good way for me to kind of get my feelings out about this loss. And I ended up writing the first 125 pages of what then became my debut novel in that program. So that's how I got into writing Scandinavian crime fiction. As for Star Trek inspiring me writing, I think especially I want to give a lot of props to Deep Space Nine when it comes to inspiring my writing, because I feel like when I first watched Deep Space Nine, there was a lot of storytelling aspects that were done in that show that I hadn't really seen done in other shows before. I mean, the world building was so exquisite, but it was also very well done in the background. And just the political aspects of the show, the religious aspects, the cultural aspects, the fact that you had all of these different figures and species and planetary problems coming to one point, just offered a kind of storytelling that you didn't see in the other Star Treks. And I learned a lot about telling good stories from Deep Space Nine and building good character relationships. And the drama on that show is just so finely tuned. And you get episodes that are, obviously it's sci-fi because it's set in a sci-fi world, but those episodes are really thrillers, I think, in the sense.
Just between you and me, did you ever write any fanfic?
I did write fanfic.
Glorious. Tell me.
Actually, funny, fanfiction is definitely, I won't say that it was 100% responsible for me being a good writer, but because there are aspects of fanfiction that are not good writing. But I do believe that the constant everyday writing, because when you're a fanfiction writer, you're writing every single day. You are devoted to those stories, and you're devoted to the people waiting for your chapters to come out. So, I was writing fanfiction every day for a very long time. I still write some on the side. Shh, don't tell anybody. No.
Oh, dear.
I don't think as professional authors, we're really supposed to admit to being fanfiction writers. But you know what? I mean, fanfiction, just that constant dedication and devotion to writing every day. You build up that discipline of writing, and you learn how to tell the story. And because you already know the characters from a show, you don't have to go deep into the development of the characters themselves. You can just develop the relationships and the plot. And so I think that really did help with my writing skills. Maybe.
We will not have a link.
No.
We will not have a link to any of your fanfic up on the show notes page.
No, but if somebody finds it, I will be curious to see if they can find it. It could be a challenge for people.
Oh, challenge accepted.
It's out there somewhere.
So, Karin, we've talked about the fact that you have collected a bunch of uniforms. Do you collect anything else Star Trek related?
I used to collect books, and I used to collect small ships, but I actually didn't collect them myself. I would be given them for every single holiday that came around. Somebody would be like, oh, I found this pewter Enterprise. And then the next year I'd get the pewter Klingon ship, and then I'd get a pewter Romulan ship. And
were these little, like 2-3 inch?
They were this big, yeah, 2-3 inches. They were beautiful. I think I had a set of 4. It's one of the things, actually, that's part of my collection that hasn't made it over to the Netherlands yet. It's still in boxes at my mom's house. So when I go back to visit, I'll have to go through all of it. But also, I used to collect books because, I don't know, there used to be a time when you could walk into a Goodwill and the entire bookshelf would be Star Trek novels. And so I would buy every single one I saw. And I had this ridiculous collection of Star Trek novels, so many that I probably couldn't even read all of them that I had. But at the moment, it's mostly cosplays. I do have some of the old toys, I have the old tricorder, the old phaser, the old communicator, which I just saw recently because somebody asked me in my video, where did you get that tricorder? And I said, I got it from Toys R Us 20 years ago or something. And then I looked it up online and saw what it was going for. And I was like, well, I need to keep a lookout for these if I see any more.
Two things. If I think, based on your description, that those pewter miniatures are from the old FASA role-playing game.
Oh.
So if you want to find out on Google, you can go type in FASA Star Trek miniatures, and I bet they will all come up. I used to collect those, and FASA used to have a Starship combat game.
Okay.
So you would lay out this giant hexagonal map of space, and they had little cardboard ships you could use that came with the set for free, or you could buy the little pewter ones if you wanted to have a little bit more of a fun experience. You didn't need them at all. They were just to look fun and to have fun with. But you could put those pewter ships on there, and, you know, depending on which way you were facing, and you would roll to see, you know, like does your phaser hit, or do you evade or whatever. So I think that was the origin of those little pewter figures. That actually
makes sense, because I remember when I got them, I remember thinking to myself, these are really fancy, but at the same time, I remember thinking, like, what were these for? Because it didn't seem like they made sense, like, individually. So that does make sense. I did have...
If they had
go ahead.
If they had a hexagonal base, they were absolutely 100% for the role-playing game. Like the stand that it sat on, if it had a 6-sided base.
I'm going to have to look. Next time I visit my mom, that's the first thing I'm going to look for.
All right, so you can put that into Google, and it'll tell you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. I apologize. Please continue.
I also remember I had this ridiculous... I had the Enterprise D. It was gold. It was very large. I think it was like 16 inches long or something. And it sat on this really elaborate base. And it had like a button you could press, and it had like phaser sounds.
Very nice.
That was very cool. That one sat on my desk for many years. I think that's also still at my mom's house. So when I go back to visit, I'll have to go through my entire collection and see what I have.
Very good. Very good. As we record this, I'm actually waiting for a new piece to arrive for my own collection. And as an author, this may interest you.
I'm excited.
Are you aware of the Star Trek novel Killing Time and the controversy around it?
Is this the one that they had to pull and re-edit?
Yes.
I have not read this, but I love that there's so much discourse about this book, and I need to get a copy of it one day.
So I guess in reaction to the whole Star Trek Prodigy mess and the erasure of the last 10 episodes from the streaming services, I decided to do my own little preservation project. So I went on eBay and I found and carefully scrutinized before I purchased, and I bought one of the original 250,000 copies of Killing Time. And that should be arriving any day now. In fact, it might even be here today. I don't know. I have to go check the mailbox.
That is very exciting.
So I'm very excited.
Because this is the one with Spock, right? Where there's a
so it has Kirk too.
But it heavily features Spock with being kind of emotional.
So the story, and I'm going on memory because I did actually read this one when it first came out. I may have actually had as a child one of the very first ones. But the idea is that it's basically an alternate universe where Vulcans basically run the Federation.
Yes.
So like right now, and I always love this because as it were in Star Trek 6 was exactly right. The Federation is pretty much a Homo sapiens only club. Yes. It's majority Homo sapiens, and like the other ones are sort of hangers on. Well, in this book, it's the Vulcans that basically run the Federation, and humans, Earth is basically not even like a full member. It's basically like a protectorate, and humans basically serve a very minor role in the Federation. And Kirk is like an ensign or lieutenant junior grade and gets assigned to the Enterprise. Spock is the captain. And he wears a scarlet cape because that's a Vulcan thing as the captain. So scarlet cape, Spock is in charge, and they realize through the story that they're in an alternate timeline, and Kirk is a screw up in the book. He's not like in any way the Kirk that we would know. He's a screw up and is not a good character. In fact, he's a bad character. And they realize that he might be at the center of this whole thing, and that's really what the book is about. And there's kind of a hint of slash ficky stuff.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think I remember that was the big discourse online, is that people would go through and they would highlight chapters or passages in the book that were just a little bit like on the edge, and that probably got it edited for that reason. Exactly. So now I want to read it. Now I have to find it. Maybe it's in my collection at my mom's house. I'll have to go back and look.
It could be. You can go online and you can actually find out, how do I have an original version of Killing Time? Okay. And you can find like what pages you look at and what text has changed. There's somebody who's actually made the side-by-sides.
That's fantastic.
So you can find that. So if you want to find out, that's what you have to do. And I will put a link up to that in the show notes. Okay. So if anyone's interested, you can go find it that way. The M5 says I'm to ask you about the time Leonard Nimoy visited your school.
Oh.
So I don't know what this is, so you got to tell me about this. What's going on here?
So when I was at university, and it was my last year of my bachelor's degree, and I was getting an English degree, and one of my English professors he was a very interesting guy. He taught a class on science fiction, and he also taught a class on Stephen King. And he tried really hard to get Stephen King to come and speak to our university that year, just to come and give a talk. And then the department was going to donate money to a foundation or charity of Stephen King's wish if he would to come.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Stephen King couldn't make it, but Leonard Nimoy could.
Oh, nice.
So Leonard Nimoy came to our university to speak, and this was probably the first time I really saw what I would consider a famous person in person speaking. And he was so colloquial and so good with just storytelling and being very personable and on the level with everybody. And at this point, I had Star Trek cosplays, the ones that my mom and I had made together. But I was afraid to wear it to this event. My mom was like, you have to wear it to this event. Leonard Nimoy is going to be there. He'll appreciate it. That's a thing that Trekkies do. Like, even my mom knew that. But I was afraid to wear it. So I didn't. And I went to this talk. It was really inspiring. I mean, he just had a way of motivating you to be your creative self. And he told us these great stories about what it was like working on the original show. And this was a couple years before the new movie, the first Kelvin movie was going to come out. I think this was in 2007 when he came to speak. And so he gave us a little bit of, insight into what he knew about the project at the time, what he was allowed to say at the time. And there was one person in the audience that was in full dress uniform. TNG era,
nice.
Full uniform.
Nice.
And was
it like the whites?
Well, no, he was wearing the red, the long.
Oh, the long. Okay, yeah, like the knee length thing. Okay.
And at the end of the talk, he was opening the floor to questions, and this man stood up, full dress regalia. He looked fantastic, and the moment he stood up, I was just so angry at myself for not having the guts to wear my uniform, my homemade Uhura uniform. But I just watched this interaction that Leonard Nimoy had with this fan. I mean, he took one look at the man and he knew his rank immediately. He addressed him by his rank in front of everybody. And it was the first time I thought, wow, the people who are in Star Trek are just as much Star Trek as the fans of Star Trek. Like, they were all one kind of thing. It just felt like, he was talking to somebody who worked with him on the set or somebody that he knew. And it just really inspired me to be like, you know what? I don't need to be embarrassed to wear Star Trek cosplays in person. And after that point was when I started saying, okay, if there's an event that's kind of Star Trek related, I'm just going to wear it. I'm going to become that person. So
I love it. I mean, we were talking before about when you and I were young. I mean, we're not the exact same age, but when we were younger, it was not cool to be a nerd. No. So I certainly would not have gone out in a Star Trek uniform, even if I'd had one, which I didn't when I was a kid. And I was thinking about this the other day. There was actually someone on TikTok who posted a stitch that they did that said, what was the most embarrassing thing you've ever done as an adult? That, like the most nerdy thing that like you might be embarrassed about. And I was going to try to stitch it, but they had their thing set to like I couldn't stitch it. Like they stitched somebody and I couldn't stitch them. I was like, I don't know how to get around this. I'm not going to bother. But I was thinking, when I went to see Into Darkness, I didn't go with a group. I just literally went by myself and I wore a full-on Kelvin uniform from the first movie. I just put it on and wore it, and I was like, whatever, and there wasn't an event. It wasn't a thing. It was just a regular showing at a regular theater. And I'm like, I'm going to go wear a uniform.
Well, I mean, every Star Trek movie that's come out since I saw Leonard Nimoy in person, I have gone in uniform.
Nice.
And actually, I worked in a movie theater when the first Kelvin film came out, and I made a big deal about that at my work. So
tell me.
So I was kind of known at the movie theater. I was kind of like the birthday party person. So if a Disney movie came out and somebody wanted to schedule a birthday party for the Disney movie for their kids, then I would kind of come in costume that day for work so that I could interact with the kids, be part of their birthday party, and then just work the rest of the day in whatever that costume was, Toy Story or Disney Princess, whatever it was.
Nice.
When this first Kelvin film was coming out, I told my manager, I said, I want to make Star Trek costumes for everybody that's working the entire weekend.
Oh, wow.
And they looked at me and they're just like, okay, well, whatever, you know. I don't think they thought I was going to be serious. But I came home and I said to my mom, I said, we have to make like 50 Star Trek uniforms of various sizes and all 3 colors. And my mom was like, oh my God, what have you gotten me into? But we did it. We spent like a week and we made like 50 uniforms, red, yellow, blue. We just did the TOS style because it was easy. You know, we did like the gold, you know, ribbon around the arm. We did different ranks. And then I came in and I had them hung up on hangers in the break room, and anybody that worked that day had to put them on because you couldn't have just one person or 2 people wearing them. You know, my boss was like, well, either everybody wears them or nobody wears them. And enough people were excited about wearing them that everybody wore them. And we kind of worked it out so that anybody who was selling tickets wore blue, anybody who worked in the concession stand wore red, and the people that were like cleaning the auditoriums were gold. And so for the entire weekend, we had everybody walking around like that. And it was so much fun. And not only fun for us working, but the people coming to see it, because it was a huge opening weekend for a movie. I mean, it was a box office hit. We had everybody that came through was just like, this is now the movie theater we come to because we expect them to do this level at all these big nerdy movies. And it was,
oh my God,
it was a lot of fun.
I bet all the nerds appreciated it. Everybody was coming to see the Star Trek movie. I bet they loved it.
Everybody wanted to get pictures with everybody, and it was great because you get a picture of like all the people cleaning the auditorium, like in their dress golds, and it was just with their brooms, and it was fun. It was a really good time.
So I understand, though, that there's more to be said about Star Trek 2009. I understand that there was a family cosplay involved here.
Yeah.
So the M5 found some intelligence about this. So tell me, what's going on here?
So, like I kind of said before, you know, I was the big nerd in the family. The rest of the people in my family, like I have 2 sisters, they weren't really into science fiction when we were younger. And when the new Star Trek movie came out, the Kelvin film, that was like the height of my getting into Star Trek cosplay seriously, where I felt like, okay, now I'm going to wear it out in public. I'm not afraid of it. You know, I'm going to make it for the entire movie theater. You know, Leonard Nimoy says it's okay. We're going to do it. And I told my family, I said, I really want us to all go see the movie together. And I want us to all dress up together. And my mom was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And my youngest sister was like, okay. And then my middle sister was like, I'll only do it if you buy like my popcorn and candy kind of thing. Like, and she's like, but then I'm going to wear like a cool leather jacket over it so you can't tell from behind or something. And my stepdad was like, no. And he was just, he was interesting because he raised 4 boys and then he married my mom and he got 3 daughters. Mm-hmm. And so for him, it was like, he was like reliving fatherhood and trying to relearn everything because it was completely different than his experience. And this was something that for him was like, this is too weird. This is too out there. I'm not going to do it. And I don't know how I convinced him. Maybe my mom did behind the scenes. But eventually he was like, okay, I will wear one. And so because I was so excited that he wore one, I gave him like a captain's uniform. So to make him, like he didn't really get it, but he was like, okay, I'll do it. He had never watched Star Trek before. I think he'd maybe seen some episodes in the 60s. But he was kind of like, you know, back then I was working hard. I didn't have time to watch TV or, you know, that was just for like the nerds or whatever. We went and saw that movie as a family. First time ever, all in cosplay. Last time, actually, nobody ever did it again with me. That was the only time they ever did it. But we went and saw that movie, and every single person in my family loved that movie. Like, even my stepdad, he walked out and he was like, well, my opinion of Star Trek has changed. I like this.
Nice.
He's like, I like this. This is cool. He's like, I will see the next one. Even my sisters were like, you know, for them, it was also, I think, at least for my middle sister, I know, it was her first introduction to Star Trek. And even she was like, well, the one actor was pretty good looking, so, I will go and see it again, I'll see the next one. So it's my first, and only real Star Trek experience with my family. And I just remember, it was such a special moment for me because I felt like we were all I was being seen, and we were all kind of experiencing it together. And it was a Star Trek movie that it was for the modern age. And I felt like because of that was the only way that this would have happened with my family. And so I have fond memories of that one.
And your sister got knocked into a Chris Pine thirst trap.
She did. And then my youngest sister, sadly, she was really into the new Chekhov. And so that was a sad
Anton Yelchin,
it was a sad ending. I remember she actually called me the day that we found out that he passed, and she was just she's like, I don't know if I can watch Star Trek anymore. And I was like, well, you have to keep watching Star Trek because, that's how you got into it.
At the Star Trek convention in Las Vegas that happened after Anton's passing, they had a giant mural, a Star Trek mural that was hung up in the passageway, and every single person at the convention was signing it, and they were going to send that off to his family. Which I thought was really nice.
That is nice.
Which I thought was really nice. So it has my signature on it, one little corner.
He was just fantastic. I think he embodied that role better than I think anybody could have.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate is, he really had the accent.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't like the authentic accent. They prefer the fake one because it's sort of like there's what you expect and there's what's real.
Right.
And sometimes they're not the same.
He was great. Oh,
no, we love Anton. We love Anton here, and we miss him. So the M5 is telling me that it's time to talk about some episodes. Are you game?
Absolutely.
I want to start by talking about something that you just had to experience for the very first time. I understand, the M5 tells me, that you have just experienced short treks for the very first time.
Yes.
So
I binged them all this morning, actually.
Oh, my goodness. So that's, 45 minutes of content?
Exactly.
No, I'm kidding. It's really only a few hours, maybe, if you put them all together.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did the short treks land for you? What one was maybe your favorite? And I realize this is your hot take. You really haven't had time to process, but just tell me how it's all sitting with you.
So first of all, I thought they were fantastic. And for multiple reasons. The first being, I love short stories. I actually started as a short story writer before I got into novels. And short stories are, one, incredibly difficult to write, but two, it's so important to be able to grasp a person's attention in a short period of time and give them a full arc of story in a short period of time. And I feel like the short treks just nailed this in every single one of those episodes. I really loved how they not only gave you a full story, and some of them were only 8 minutes long, but they also gave you such insight into the world, into the timeline, and into the character development of the characters that were in the episodes. And the two that stand out to me, well, actually, three of them stand out to me. The one Q&A with Spock and Una in the turbo lift, Children of Mars.
The musical episode.
Children of Mars, and then the one with the tardigrade, the animated one. Those three are the ones that stood out to me the most.
Ephraim and Dot?
Yes. Ephraim and Dot, that's right. Yeah, those are the three that stood out to me.
Very nice, very nice. And which one do you think touched you the most?
Man, Children of Mars. So I watched them in order, so that was the last one I watched. And I kind of watched them because I wanted to get into a Star Trek mood for this podcast. And I hadn't seen them yet, so I was finally like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch them. And then at the same time, I'm like, they're going to be fun. I'm like, this is going to build up my enthusiasm. And then Children of Mars just hit so hard emotionally. And it was amazing because I remember when the episode ended, I went back and looked at it, and I think it's less than 9 minutes. I think it was one of the shorter ones. And I was just so overcome because there's very minimal dialogue. I don't think the protagonists speak at all. You get dialogue at the beginning from their parents, but you don't get any dialogue from them or from the people at the school. So it's
very little.
It's all emotion. It's all visual, but the storytelling was so tight. And to be so affected within such a short time period, I was like, this is fantastic writing, and they need to do more of this. That was an incredible episode.
And Peter Gabriel singing David Bowie, also incredible.
Yes. Actually, when that song started, I knew immediately what the song was, but I was like, I hadn't heard it. I don't know if they changed. I know they changed the speed, but I didn't know if they had also changed the key of the song, because it landed so poignantly that I thought, this is something I have to look up later and see if they actually changed the key of the song, because it had such a melodramatic, emotional quality to it that you don't have from the original version. That was very touching. Yeah. The thing that was great about all of those stories, but that one in particular, is to see the events of Trek from the perspective of somebody who isn't on the Enterprise or isn't on a deep space station, who isn't involved in the day-to-day galaxy-changing events, just the people who are affected by those events. And I thought, if they did an entire series that was just about the normal people living in the universe, it would be, I think it could be one of the most incredible pieces of storytelling that Star Trek would ever do. If they did a series that was just like Children of Mars, but over different points of time.
I think about Children of Mars often when people ask me, or I get in discussions with other nerds online about what the Federation is actually like outside of Starfleet.
Yes.
Because so much of Star Trek is told through the lens of Starfleet. I mean, even Deep Space Nine is told through the lens of, Starfleet running this station with a bunch of locals, on it.
And they try to get, there's a few episodes where they try to give you the Bajoran perspective, but you're still seeing it through the Starfleet lens, so to speak. And
Bajor is not part of the Federation.
Right. And you still don't feel like you're on their side. Whereas Children of Mars, it's like you were 100% on the side of these two characters. And seeing the side of the quote unquote utopia that isn't so utopian. Yeah.
One of the questions that the episode brings up for me, and this, I'm not trying to be snarky or glib about it. It's just that who is actually raising these kids?
Yeah.
Their parents are on the moon, or they're up on Mars, right? They're up on the space station building the ships. The parents are not living with the kids. It's not exactly clear who's with these kids every day.
Right.
And I found it sad. My heart broke for those kids, really separate from the elements of the episode. It's a question we don't get an answer to.
No. And I thought they did a really incredible job of, not to bring this on a downer moment, but it felt...
Oh, it's okay.
I was in high school when 9/11 happened. And I remember the school that I was at the time, there were a lot of children who had parents that were in politics, who were actually working in DC or working in New York, that would come home on the weekends, kind of thing. And we were fortunate enough to be in a school that had televisions, and it felt very much like that ending scene where the girls are sitting in the corridor, and then the news pops up on the television, and then everybody's just kind of frozen to what to do. And it felt a lot like that moment for me. And what I really liked in the filming of that scene was when they pan to the Vulcan, I don't know if he's the principal or whoever's watching.
Headmaster.
Yeah, headmaster.
Whatever. Or well, that's not the word. I'm sorry. Head of school.
Yeah, head of school. But when they pan to him, seeing what's going on, and, we know Vulcans as, being this stoic, emotionless, or hiding their emotions kind of characters. And then we see him in a very subtle movement of his face. You see that he has no answer to how he's going to deal with all of these students. And you can see the panic in his eyes, and you can see the fear in his eyes and the emotion. And in that a very quick glimpse of his expression, you see, I think, what was probably going on at my school as well, of all the adults that were around at the same time, children being worried, was my parent there, or was somebody I know there when that happened. And that was a very, very strong episode, and just beautiful storytelling to do that with so little words.
One of the things I appreciate about that episode, and by contrast, one of the things that annoys me about Vulcan episodes in general, and I think this is really a question of direction, and maybe the actor not understanding the part. It could be one of those two things. I don't really know. I'd have to know more about the background in each individual case, but you can be the most Vulcanian Vulcan of all time, right? The most logical, the most computerized, robotic Vulcan like ever. Vulcan on level 11 out of 10. That does not mean that you are not aware that other beings have emotions and you have to respond to them. But sometimes we see Vulcans who are like, I don't understand your emotions. You're completely illogical. I don't even understand. It's like, it shows a stunning lack of self-awareness. Right. And you do see this from time to time in Star Trek with Vulcans, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, you're in a giant multicultural, society that's dealing with beings from all over, and even though something's not your jam, you have to acknowledge that other people have these things, right? Yeah. And I liked how in that episode he appreciated it, even if he didn't have to show it.
Yeah, and that character alone, I mean, I think we see him for less than a minute on screen. And in the beginning, we see him. It seems very typical Vulcan, like he's rule abiding. He's pretty firm. He's stern. Like, you're late to class. I'm going to be writing you up. That's how the rules are. And then by the end of his mini arc in that episode, we see somebody who literally is probably also experiencing their own emotions. We don't know if he has family members there as well, but he knows that students do. And yeah, that was a really subtle and delicate performance. I thought that was a very good Vulcan performance.
Let me just say, one of the things I did love in general about the short tracks is it just gave them the opportunity to try different things.
Yes.
And sometimes they hit, and sometimes they hit it out of the park, and sometimes they missed. I mean, that whole Tribble episode for me was a miss for many reasons, which I won't go into. But it's I really appreciated it, that it gave them a chance to try some things, and I think they did a great job.
Yeah, I hope they do more. So, I mean, I would like to see more. There are so many opportunities there. I would like to write short treks. So if Star Trek is listening, I could write some short treks for you guys.
I think the biggest question as of right now that I have in my mind is, we know that Discovery's coming to a close.
Yes.
And I don't know if they're going to integrate the happenings of Calypso into the ending of Discovery. Because Zora and the Discovery are sitting there for,
that's right,
what's his name? Kraft to find.
Yeah. For like 1,000 years.
So the question is...
She says she's alone for 1,000 years, I think she says.
Yeah. So are they going to resolve this? I mean, is this how the show ends, right? Discovery? I don't know. I don't know if they're just going to say, no, we, that doesn't count, or if it's actually going to resolve. I literally have no idea. So I think I heard some rumblings, and this is literally like stuff that's running around my head. I don't have a canonical source, like an actual link I can point to. I seem to recall somewhere they were saying, don't worry about that episode too much. Like someone involved with the show saying that, like, we're not going to be linked to that, but
I would actually,
I don't know.
Let me think about this. I feel like on one hand, I'd like to see Discovery, the crew, I'd like to see their storylines have a nice send-off. And then if they wanted to then do a post-credits where we do a jump and we find out about Zora's future, I think that could be interesting. It would be
like a Marvel shawarma scene.
Yeah, but I feel like it would be kind of going into Ridley Scott territory, like, But I think that could be an interesting. That would be something that Star Trek had never really done before. So that, I don't know. I think it could be fun to explore.
All right, we'll see. Talking about having fun while exploring, let's talk about Star Trek IV, the one with the whales. Yes. The M5 tells me we have to talk about this movie, so I want to know what's going on with this one for you.
So this is my favorite Star Trek movie. I think it's a lot of people's favorite Star Trek movie, especially if you kind of grew up on the originals, which, even though I wasn't around for the originals, that was the one that kind of got me into it and kept me watching. And I watched that. I was quite young when I saw that one, and I'd lived in San Francisco when I was younger. It was one of the places that we were stationed at. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it felt a lot like, and that was also in the 80s. So it really felt to me like, oh, we're going back to a place that I have been to. That's, my stomping grounds as a kid. And, it was a fun episode. So as a child, this was like, to me, this is fun science fiction. This is a great gateway to science fiction. I think also It was probably my introduction to like time travel sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the exception of Quantum Leap, which was something I was watching also at the time. This was like my first real like time travel story that I'd ever seen. And I just remember thinking from a creative standpoint as a kid, like that is so cool to have these wild characters from the future travel back to essentially my time period-ish and try to figure out what's weird about the time that we live in, because we're watching it from a point of view of everything that they're doing is weird and unbelievable. And then they come to our world and it's even weirder and more unbelievable to them. And that was just such a fun episode. It was one of the only movies that I actually have memories of watching with my mom, with the exception of Insurrection, because we did physically go to the theater to see that one. I remember watching that one with her when I was younger, you know, on the VHS in our living room. And I just remember my mom didn't really know a lot about Star Trek, but she knew who all of these people were just because, you know, they were big when she was growing up. And I just remember her laughing at it too and thinking to myself, oh, she thinks this is fun. I think this is fun. Like, it just was for me, it was like a really big bonding moment.
Oh, that's glorious.
And the whales, of course, I thought that was so crazy. Like, I was like, how are they going to get these whales back to the future? How is it even possible? And then, you know, that scene where they're like building this big tank. And I just remember thinking to myself, they are flying with whales in the spaceship. I just was like, that's wild. Like, that is the most amazing thing. And of course, as a kid, I thought this was all real. They really got these whales into the spaceship somehow.
Yeah, and it doesn't make a lick of sense, kind of logistically speaking, because the bird of prey is supposed to be really tiny and only have a dozen crew, but we got room for two whales. Yeah, and I don't worry about that stuff too much, but I know there's people out there who desperately want all this stuff to make sense, and I don't know if I wish them good luck with that.
I think a lot of people went through this phase back then, like the SeaWorld, I want to work with whales, I want to be a whale trainer phase.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, I saw that movie and I was just like, I don't want to be a whale trainer. I was like, but I just want to jump in like Spock and like talk to the whales. I remember thinking, like, I want to do that one day. Now you probably couldn't pay me to do that because I would be too afraid. But
whales are gentle.
As a kid, I thought that's cool.
Well, they eat shrimp. They eat, like, you know, stuff out, little tiny things in the ocean. It's all good. Now, for myself, I just want to share my own little ceremony for Star Trek 4.
Okay.
Whenever I watch it, I will always have a delivery pizza and a 6-pack of Michelob. I was
going to say, if you have a Michelob for that.
Absolutely mandatory. Yeah. I despise Michelob, but I will always have one, actually several, while watching this movie, and I enjoy it every time. The secret, by the way, got to have it very cold and put it in the glass. Yes. It's not that great even then, but it's part of the ritual of the whole thing, and I appreciate it and enjoy it every time.
I think that's fantastic.
So if anybody comes over to the palatial Trek Profiles estate and we watch Star Trek 4, you're getting a Michelob and a pizza.
Fantastic.
All right, we already talked about Insurrection, so let's move on and talk about Mirror Mirror TOS Season 2, Episode 4, of course, with goateed Spock. Yes. Tell me what's happening with this one.
This episode, I think, this is going to jump back to my fan fiction career a little bit, because I remember when I saw this episode, I remember thinking to myself, did they just write fan fiction into their show? I remember that being like an actual thought that I had, because that episode reads like a lot of fan fiction. A lot of fan fiction is set in like alternate universes, because then you can have a love story between two characters who have never met, or you can have, a rivalry between two characters who are best friends. And I just remember thinking when I saw that show, like, that's exactly what they did here. And then it was just fantastic storytelling. And I think it kind of started some of that storytelling aspects of what would eventually become things that I would put into my own writing. This idea that you can have worlds within worlds. And it must have been my first kind of introduction to like alternate realities. And I just remember thinking, like, who hasn't imagined some of their favorite book characters or movie characters where the universe that they're living in is just slightly different, and how that affects them as a character. And I remember thinking that the way that Leonard Nimoy dealt with Spock's character in the Mirror universe was so brilliantly done. And it just felt so intentional and so real. And it was interesting because this was a character that I really loved normally. And then you see this other version of him, which is not too different, but is different enough because the world is different enough that his circumstances had changed, that you get to see another side of him. And at the same time thinking to yourself, well, Spock Prime might also have that side to him as well. It's just been suppressed or never had to come forward because of circumstances of his story. And I just remember thinking, like, that is such a great way of analyzing character. And I think that if anybody was trying to figure out their own characters for their own stories, I think that's a great episode to look at from a writing standpoint. And from an acting standpoint, too, there's some fantastic scenes in that episode. That scene with Spock and McCoy in the med bay is just so intense.
Yeah, it's glorious. Yeah. If you're looking for your Zeal Wesley Crusher fanfic shipping fanfic, I'm sure that's a thing that exists somewhere. I have no idea. Actually, I'm making that up right now, but I'm sure it exists.
That would be an interesting combination. I would read that one. So if somebody has written that one, I'd like to read it because.
All right, sounds good.
I never was happy with the Zeal's canon storyline.
Yeah, she got shot out of a cannon, pretty much. Got a cannon shot at her. Yeah. Pretty much, that's that story. So I'm going to ask for your hot take. Mirror universe, generally speaking, in Star Trek. Too much, not enough, just right.
I think we could get more of it. The cool thing about the Mirrorverse is it's supposed to show us the opposite of what the regular universe gives us. It shows us, a universe without the Federation, without Starfleet, in a sense, with how things could have gone and how they could have gone badly. But there are some fantastic stories in the universe. And like what Deep Space Nine did, I think was really interesting. And I'd always wished we could have seen more in the other older series, but I think what then Discovery went and did with it was fantastic. I really loved Discovery's take on the Mirrorverse. So I would like to see more. They could give me an entire Mirrorverse series. I would think that would be interesting. Or let's do a Kelvin movie in the Mirrorverse.
Mirror Kelvin. I don't think I could handle it. I literally don't think I could handle it. Let's talk about TOS, the Enterprise incident. This, of course, is the one where we have the amazing Ms. Linville playing the Romulan commander, the unnamed Romulan commander. And we have Spock. There's sort of this will they or won't they sort of thing going on, while Kirk gets a little bit of a surgical operation and steals a cloaking device. So what is special in this episode for you?
I think the biggest thing about this episode for me was Linville and the Romulan commander, because I remember when I was younger growing up, I feel like I didn't have a lot of female characters that I was seeing on the screen that were being represented in a way where they were both feminine and masculine, beautiful but strong, somewhere bordering between being smart but also being vulnerable. I felt like a lot of the female characters that you were getting in movies and television shows when I was younger, they fell into the one trope or another trope. There wasn't a lot of dimension to them. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I saw this episode, I think it was probably one of the first times where I saw a female character that was balancing all of those aspects. And she's obviously very intelligent. Mm-hmm. She's risen up in command. She's powerful, but she's also she also has her beauty and her vulnerability that we see with Spock. And I just remember thinking, finally, here's a character that felt more well-rounded, like we saw a lot of the male characters. And so that was the one thing that stood out for me the most when I first saw the episode, and still stands out to me as well, aside from the fact that that dress is fantastic, and I would love to find the fabric for that dress that she wears because it's so beautiful. The other thing about that episode is, I was never really into romance when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I was like the typical sci-fi nerd girl, when all of my female friends were really into romantic comedies and those kinds of things. I just really didn't feel that romantic interest until like later. And I think this episode was the first time where I thought to myself, oh, is this romance? You know, like when I saw the Romulan commander and Spock interacting, and it's very subtle, but it's also very prominent. It's very there's this close up scene where they like come in really close to their faces, and you just see their hands touching, and it's not overtly romantic. And there's this tension in the background of, you know, what's going to happen because this is a Romulan ship, and we know that Kirk is sneaking around in the background, and we know that Spock is kind of faking it, but also not. And Nimoy does a fantastic job of edging that line where for a minute you're not 100% sure. And I remember when I watched it for the first time, I thought to myself, I'm not really sure which way this is going to go. I just remember thinking, like, I hope she makes it in the end, because I remember thinking, like, this is a really cool and interesting character. And yeah, I think that was kind of like the first time I thought to myself, oh, maybe this is what my friends are talking about when they go and see the Julia Roberts movies. You know, this was like my version of, you know, that kind of a romantic awakening, was like this very subtle hand touching scene with Spock and the Romulan commander.
I know that there's novels that follow on from this, but I just want to say, as far as I'm concerned from the episode, her head ends up in a jar somewhere.
I think it probably does, yes.
You know, which is a tragedy, but I think you've put your finger on it correctly, which is that this whole episode hinges on the fact that it has to be a valid choice, not the choice you would want Spock to take.
Right.
But it has to be realistic. If it was sort of some mustache twirling, you know, come join me, my dear, and we shall explore the galaxy together and have power. You know, the whole episode would fail. It just wouldn't land. No. And it was just a great alchemy of the acting and the direction that they got, and the editing too, to really make it be, you know, this, you know, Spock, if he chose to, could have made that happen.
Yes.
And it would have been a valid choice for him to make. Otherwise, I think the episode would not even be half as good, and people wouldn't put it in the list of good episodes. So I do want to just offer, there was a follow-on to this that was a fan production called Star Trek Continues. And I just want to say that there's some problems with Star Trek Continues, and that some people involved with the production, some stories have come out. I'm not educated or up on these allegations, so I don't want to comment on them because I don't really know, but I'm aware of them. But I can say that as a fan production, it is incredible, because they actually built sets, like actual sets, and they were using the same lenses.
Wow. That's really impressive.
If you just turned it on, you would think you're looking at the original series. I mean, because it has that look. Even if you dress people up in the original uniforms and put them in the original sets and film it with an iPhone, it doesn't look right. It's because they were using the lights and lenses and everything. It has that look of like 1968 in the Star Trek Continues. And one of the things they did was they actually had a follow-on story with the Romulan commander, and the actress is the original actress's daughter, and she looks like her clone.
Wow. Okay.
Looks exactly like her. It is mind-blowing. So I just want to put it out there as an option. If you're interested, you can go find it. I think it's for free up on YouTube, but just be aware that it's problematic, I think is the term that the youths use today to describe it. But as a production, it's amazing. So go check that out. Let's talk about a novel, A Stitch in Time. Now, this one, of course, is the sort of backstory of Garak, written by Andrew Robinson. And as we sit here and record this, they've just released the audiobook voiced by him, which is very exciting. I read this in preparation for our interview, and one of the big problems I had with it is that I couldn't just read the doggone thing because I was hearing it in Andy Robinson's voice. You could do that, Doctor, you know, and so it just kind of slowed down the whole thing for me. But I don't know if you had that problem or not, but tell me what's special about this.
No, but I did have that problem, but it wasn't a problem, because for me, it added some authenticity to the book. And that's one of the reasons why this book has always kind of stood out for me, just in books in general, not just Star Trek books. So I'm pretty sure that I read this book shortly after it came out, because that was about the time that I was finally watching Deep Space Nine, and Garak very quickly became one of my favorite characters because he is just so versatile, and there's just so much intrigue around him. And I remember reading this book thinking this was going to be a sci-fi book, this is going to be a Star Trek book, but it's really not. It's a thriller, it's a political drama, there's some romance. The first third of the book feels almost like a YA dystopia, like a Hunger Games type novel. And then we get all of these scenes from the future, him retelling, where he is now after the Cardassian War and these interactions with Bashir. And I just remember that when I read this book, I was like, this is storytelling. This was just incredible storytelling. And it kind of opened up my eyes to this idea that a book doesn't have to be one genre.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it has to be a specific genre so that your publisher knows to where to put it on the shelf, because if they can't put it on a shelf, then they can't sell it. That's kind of like something that they say in the industry. So you have to be clear about what genre it is. In this book, it lucks out because it's a Star Trek novel, so we know what the genre is essentially, but really at its heart, it's not. It's a spy novel. It's a political thriller, and it's just a really, really good book. And he wrote this book as a way to develop his own insight into the character. Always kind of spoke to me in a way that the book gives the books a more authenticity in a sense.
What is it about the Garrick character that appeals to you?
So I think Garrick is just, as a character, is incredibly complex. And to see that on screen is one thing, and then to see it in a book form is just another layer of that complexity. He's a protagonist in his own right. But he's also an antagonist. He's morally gray. We don't really know whose side he's on. He's always saying he's on his own side, but there's always that feeling that he's not. And Andrew Robinson really reflects that not only on the show, but in this book. The intrigue is a big part of what makes Garrick so interesting to me, because especially from a writer's standpoint, your protagonist should be a character that keeps you questioning when you're reading him. And the whole time you're reading this book, you're asking yourself, okay, is this going to end up like another one of his stories to Dr. Bashir? Is this going to be all a lie at the end? Or is this going to be all half versions of the truth? And, when you get to the end and you realize what it is, and I won't say because, spoilers, I think it's very satisfying. And it's a great character analysis that you don't see a lot, especially in spy thrillers. You don't see a lot. And so from a thriller aspect, it's a very exciting book.
I would second that. I think it's fantastic. And you don't even have to be the biggest Deep Space Nine fan to really enjoy it. It's told from a great perspective. You get a lot more Cardassian backstory, a lot of his youth growing up in these like weird spy schools that they sent him to and everything. There's a lot there, and it's just very rich. And I really enjoy these kind of novels that take us deeper into alien cultures in the show.
Yes.
And so I always want to give a plug to one of my favorite Star Trek novels of all time, which is The Final Reflection. Have you ever read that one?
Is this the Klingon one? Or
yes.
I think it's been years.
It's excellently written. It's just well crafted. It's a beautiful book.
What you said about it being just an excellent book, that's the other thing about A Stitch in Time is if you look at it from just a writing standpoint, it's very difficult to write a book like that. He's writing the book. He's got scenes happening in the past. He has scenes that are happening while the character was on Deep Space Nine. And then he has the present day. And that is, from a plot perspective, that's really hard to maneuver when you're writing a book. And it's difficult to do so many timelines in a single novel and make it come together so cohesively. So that, on top of it being a fantastic character development, character analysis, and then world building that is so well done and so purposely done, but at the same time, not so in your face that you feel like you're just being bombarded with Cardassian history or Cardassian, military explorations. It's so precisely done. It's just so Garrick that it makes it such a great book. And if somebody out there is looking for a book that can handle multiple timelines and multiple perspectives over time and all of that, it's a fantastic book to look at. I mean, it's a book that if I wanted to write a Star Trek novel, I would start there and see how he did it and where he was successful and try to implement those aspects into my own writing.
One episode we have left to talk about, and that is Deep Space Nine, Season 3, Episode 22, Explorers, where we have sort of a little nautical adventure between Sisko and Jake building the Bajoran warp ship. So tell me what's going on in this particular episode for you, Karin.
So this episode has actually multiple things on multiple levels for me. I remember the first time I saw this movie, it just kind of hit me like a truck because I was so surprised. So when my mom remarried, I really struggled to kind of get along with my stepdad. You know, I had kind of gone most of my life with my dad not really being at home or in the picture. He was working a lot or he just wasn't around. And so to suddenly have this new person in my life who was trying his best to be a father figure, you know, we were really kind of butting heads in the beginning. And where we ended up connecting was he liked to build antique cars. That was his hobby. That was something he had been doing all of his life. That was something that he had done with his sons. And now all of a sudden he had 3 daughters and he wasn't sure what to do, but that was what came to him naturally. So me being the oldest, he was just kind of like, do you want to build a car together? And it was very much like this Jake and Sisko thing where Jake doesn't 100% really want to do it, but he sees how important it is to his dad and how it means something, and he wants to spend that time with him to kind of get to know him better or kind of rekindle the relationship, which by this point in Deep Space Nine is a little bit, you know, up and down just because Jake is off doing his own thing. And that I saw my stepdad and me in that role as well. And the other thing that happens in that episode is that Jake finally tells his dad, he tells Sisko that he's gotten into the petting school and he's going to be a writer. And it was a few years after this episode that I'd seen this episode that I had also gotten into this writing program. And like Jake, I told my stepdad and my mom at the time that I got in, but I'm not going to go. And I kind of, without realizing it, gave my parents the same reason that Jake gave his dad, basically saying, I don't feel like I have the experience enough to write the stories that I want to tell. Just like when I said that I had met with my creative writing professor and he said, you know, you only do this because this is your passion. This is what you want to do. You want to tell stories. And, you know, I was super young when I got into that program. And like Jake, I just kind of felt like I'm not ready for it yet. And I really saw a lot of myself and my relationship with my stepdad in that relationship that Jake has with Sisko in that episode. And so that's the one reason why the episode always kind of rang so emotional for me and rang so true, because I really saw myself in Jake in the episode, which is funny because like a lot of characters in Star Trek, I always assumed that like you have to go into Starfleet. Like that's what you do, you know, that you follow the Starfleet. And so seeing characters like Jake or then Tilly in Discovery kind of make decisions that kind of subvert this idea that you have to follow Starfleet, mm-hmm. or even like Wesley saying, you know, you don't have to go that way. You can change your mind. You can do something different. Those episodes have always really struck with me since I made that decision to go into writing. The other thing about the episode that is kind of weird is, so when I made the decision to not do the writing program, I ended up going to medical school instead.
Goodness, okay.
And I know it's really crazy turnabout. And in that episode, the smaller secondary storyline is Bashir kind of worrying the whole episode because he's going to run into the valedictorian from his med school class.
This is the pre-ganglionic fiber, post-ganglionic nerve thing. Okay.
Which actually had a similar question like that on a med school test. And I remember like sitting there laughing when I got to that test question and everybody's staring at me like, what are you doing? Like, this is a serious test. I'm laughing. But I remember that I hadn't seen that episode for a long time. And then I hadn't seen that episode since I was younger and since my stepdad and I had been working on that car. And then it was probably almost 10 years later, I was in medical school and I was struggling because I wasn't sure that it was the right path for me. I wanted it to be, I really wanted it to be. But I also had this voice in the back of my head that was kind of saying, but is it really the right path for you? And sometime during that first year of medical school, I rewatched that episode and I saw Bashir's storyline and remembered some of the reasons why I wanted to go to medical school. But then I resaw Jake's storyline and I was like, oh my gosh, I just came full circle on this entire episode. And it came back to me and I was like, well, I left that writing program, but I should have probably done what Jake did and eventually gone back and done that writing program. And so then I thought to myself, you know what? I am not the pre-ganglionic fiber or post-ganglionic nerve person. I am the Pennington School person. And I finished out that year and then I left and I went into the writing program instead and became an author.
It's really wonderful that you're an author because I want to hit you with a question that I've been thinking about recently. There was a controversy, I guess. I don't know, that might be putting too big of a word on it. And I don't even remember the context now, but it was someone telling another friend a personal story in confidence. Turns out that the person hearing this was an author and then put it in one of their own stories. And there was a controversy about this online and people were weighing in and another author, not one of the people in the original story, but another author said, anybody who's an author, you have to be aware that if you're friends with an author, they are going to take you, turn you upside down, shake you by your feet violently until every story you've ever had in your entire life falls out, and they're going to steal all of it and put it in their stories. And if you can't handle that, don't be friends with an author. I just want to put that out there and get your reaction to it.
I think I do remember that because I think it was published in the Atlantic or something. I think it made.
Could have been.
I think it became a big. I think there was a big article about that. I don't remember the details. I mean, I'll just say from personal experience, in my books, which are completely fictional, there are some truthful events. I've never gone so far as to tell somebody's story exactly. But for example, in my first novel, I make reference to the fact that the protagonist lost his daughter in a shopping mall once, and that he was trying to find her all over the shopping mall. That was something that personally happened to me. I was that kid that got lost in the shopping mall and my mom was like running around screaming, trying to find me. So I would put like little things like that in. I don't think that I would ever use anybody's full story because that would feel a little too, what's the right word for that? The thing about writing fiction is that you craft the story yourself. That you bring truth to the story through the emotions, and maybe there's an event that actually happened, but it's not the full story. The enjoyment of writing, for at least for me, and the enthusiasm of writing is to come up with ideas that are more spontaneous and feel like they could possibly happen, but didn't necessarily happen. I'm very careful because I enjoy watching true crime documentaries. I'm very careful that I don't, that if I see something in an episode of a true crime documentary that I think, oh, that's interesting, that I take maybe one tiny aspect of what's interesting, but not the entire story. That's not my story to tell. So yes, I would be careful about what you say around an author, but I think that most authors probably wouldn't use your entire story because that would be kind of boring to write. It just loses a little bit of the imagination, I think, if you use somebody else's story completely.
Yeah.
But if you mention to somebody that somebody stuck a pencil through your hand in the 7th grade and you had to go to the principal's office with a pencil sticking in your hand, like that's something that I would be like, oh, I might remember that. That maybe I would put into a story.
Well, you've told us, Karin, how Star Trek has been a part of your life ever since you were a little girl, starting with the motion picture and then going into the other films, watching all the shows. What does Star Trek mean to you?
Star Trek to me is possibilities. It's the idea that you can change the person that you are, that you can be a different person, a better person, that you don't have to stay in your lane, so to speak, of what you're doing, that there's always another option for you out there if what you're doing at the moment doesn't feel like it's your true calling. A lot of people say that Star Trek is hope, and I do agree with that as well. It is hope that we as humanity are going to better ourselves, but it's also hope that in the present time that there are bright lights in the darkness, so to speak, and that even if you're in your lowest moment, there is something that can bring you joy or bring you happiness or contentment. And yeah, that's what Star Trek is for me.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation, but the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru.
All right.
Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5, just for you, based on some gentle internet sleuthing. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our program. Are you ready to face the Kobayashi Maru, Karin?
Yes, let's do it.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record our guests' responses.
Acknowledged.
Which of these Badmirals is worse, Buenamigo or Pressman?
Buenamigo.
Which championship do we have tickets for, Parisi Squares or Anbo Jitsu?
Parisi Squares.
Which of these is the worst way to go in the Star Trek universe? Getting turned into a geometric shape by Andromeda Galaxy aliens and crushed? Used as a Gorn breeding sac? Or getting blasted with the Veron T disruptor?
Gorn breeding sac.
Which of these characters are you putting into your next holodeck adventure? Barclay, Neelix, or Peanut Hamper?
Barclay.
Which of these societies is worse? Majalis, the Aurelius Colony, or Kajitar?
Majalis.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing results.
Karin, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Karin is awarded the title of Hollow Novel Writer for the firm Rott & Forrester.
So there you go.
Yes, excellent.
So, Karin, please tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can find your books, where they can tweet at you if they disagree with any of your Kobayashi Maru questions, and where they can find all of your wonderful cosplays and sing-alongs.
Yep. So you can find all of my books wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Kobo, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble online. They are available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback. And you can find me on Instagram as an author at Karin Nordin Author, or as a cosplayer at Jazzercise Loki, and the same for TikTok, Karin Nordin Author or Jazzercise Loki for my cosplay. And I'm also on YouTube at Pen and Trill. And I'm also on Twitter as well, but I think it's K Nordin Author. So there weren't enough letters.
And of course, we will have links to all of that up on the show notes page at trekprofiles.com with links to purchase all of our books and all of that. I don't do affiliate links or anything like that, so it's just going to be straight stuff. So go ahead, if you wish to purchase any of her stuff, go ahead and head there, and you'll be able to find links for all of that and links to find all of her various social media presences, which are fantastic, and I would encourage you to follow her there. And the unmitigated joy that seeing your Star Trek cosplays brought to me on TikTok is the reason I decided to reach out to you and see if you wanted to be on the show. So thank you for being part of Trek Profiles, Karin. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I just really enjoyed every minute of it.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you, yes you, that you may send us your pleasant and idle musings, your angry and venomous feedback, or photoshops of yourself with a Rutherford cyborg implant to feedback at trekprofiles.com, or on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be zippered up into a musical quantum uncertainty field. This time, I leave you with a quote from Mirror Spock, who said in that famous TOS episode, quote, "I do not threaten, Captain. I merely state facts." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Karin, I don't think you watched the episode all the way through.
Really?
Did you get to the commercial?
There's something after the credits? Wait.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, no. Okay,
Yes.
don't spoil it. I'll have to go back and watch it. I didn't know there was anything after.
You'll have to go back and watch it. Yeah.
Oh, no.
So.
Oh no, there's more controversy.
You got to watch.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to watch that one all the way through. It's kind of a thing. So I won't spoil anything. I will just say you need to watch that episode all the way through, all the way to the end.
Okay. Now I'm nervous.
That's all I'll say.
I'll have to write up well, it'll probably be my next TikTok then.
You absolutely could make a massive amount of TikToks based on this one little bit in that episode. There is no question in my mind about that.
Well, I'm glad you didn't spoil it for me, but now I'm really nervous because now I'm going to have to watch it again from the beginning just to make sure I didn't miss anything else.
You don't have to. You don't have to. You can put the episode on and just go right to the ending credits and just go from there.
Okay. All right. Stay tuned, everyone.
I mean, and you can rewatch it again if you want. I mean, it's only, 10 minutes, so you can go for it.
Man.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing. It's kind of a crazy thing.
So it is a day later, and I have just finished watching the post-credits scene of the Tribble episode of Short Treks, and I am thoroughly disturbed. I don't even know what to say about this. Actually, I have a lot to say about this, but on the whole, I don't like it. It really bothers me. Like, I am extremely bothered. Like, I get it's a joke, but it went a little bit too far for me. But props to the writers for taking that risk. I'd like to see risks in Star Trek, so I don't like it, but I do.
I think you're going to be in really good shape, and I'm glad, believe it or not, that if you had a recording incident, it happened on my show, because this is a low-stakes situation.
No,
right?
I really appreciate it, because now I feel definitely way more prepared for the things that are coming next month. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you giving me a second chance as well.
No, I appreciate you coming on. Believe it or not, this is the first time this has ever happened that I've lost a recording. Well, not lost, but
I lost it.
No, there was definitely something weird, and we know that it was on your end because your local recording had it, right? Like
Yes.
Like sometimes I wonder, like, is it Squadcast? Is it me? Is it my computer? Is it the network or the internet? Like, if your local recording has the problem, that's internal to your computer. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we know that there was something wonky there, but that's okay. We got it sorted.
I tried it again with the new microphone and the new setup, and it still didn't work in QuickTime. It was doing the same exact thing. So now I'm doing Audacity, so hopefully that will work fine.
It should absolutely work, and you're coming across great in Squadcast.
Fantastic.
And to be honest, Squadcast is actually the audio tracks that I actually use.
Okay.
For most of the time, only because Squadcast does a couple things on its end that makes the audio a little better. This is probably more than you want to know. I don't want to bore you with any of this nonsense.
Because I've actually been thinking about doing some kind of podcast or something with another writer and doing like a kind of an author talk thing. And this is all good for me to know because then I can prepare ahead of time.
Just a warning, and this one to be true. The episode may never be released, just like that first recording.
Yeah. Well, we're glad that one's not going to be released.
No, I will delete the backups, and we will never talk about that one again.
Actually, I always loved that episode as a child because my mom is from Sweden. And the word horta sounds a lot like the Swedish word for heart. And I always felt like it was, I always thought as a kid that was what it was supposed to mean. That this was like the heart of this planet was this creature.
Is that how you ended up in Scandinavia?
Yes. Yeah. Because my mother's from Sweden and my grandparents were from Norway. And they came to the United States. And then I came back and lived in Sweden for a little bit. Now I'm in the Netherlands.
So can you pass as a local with your accent?
No, there's always an accent. They always hear like the American accent in the background. Yeah, I can speak to people. I can. Yeah, that's not a problem. But they know they can hear it. But I always loved that episode because as a child I always thought they were talking about. Like I thought, this is so symbolic. This like silicon creature is the heart of the planet. And then my mom was just like, I don't think they're saying a heart. I think they're just like, I think it's a made up word. Well,
you never know.
It's true. I remember when the first of the new movies came out, I went in and I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this like with zero expectations. because I wasn't sure about Timothée Chalamet. I just wasn't sure about trying to bring this film to film again, a story to film again. And I was so surprised. I was so pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed the first half. So I hope the second half meets the first one. I marathon short treks today. So I am like...
Oh, did you?
I just finished Children of Mars, so I'm like a little emotional.
Oh, maybe we should talk about it. Do you want to talk about it?
Oh, we can absolutely talk about it. Oh, it's fantastic.
I will.
All of those episodes.
I will add it.
Fantastic storytelling in all of those episodes. I have big feelings about short treks now. They need to continue it.
All right.
That's okay. I went through a big Battlestar Galactica phase, and I just said frack for everything for like 2 years, and my family was just like, "Can you stop? Can you just say the real word, please?"
I was totally taken with that show as well. So I was a huge fan of the redone Battlestar Galactica. I loved it so much.
So good.
I still have to admit, I was never a fan of Baltar, not even to the end, and I didn't want him to live. I wanted him to catch a bullet.
I love Baltar, but I think I love him because of that feeling. I like a character that challenges my emotions, that challenges how I feel about them. I like a character that makes me think about about myself introspectively, and I feel like Baltar did that continuously throughout the series, and so I really liked him. It's interesting because I've been watching the old series backwards. I don't know why. I just decided I'm going to watch them backwards and see how different that is. So I started with like Voyager, DS9, and now I'm going to start Next Generation. And it's funny because I always felt that the Next Generation, like I love that show, but I didn't connect with it in the same way that I connected with DS9 and Voyager. And so now that it's been a while since I've watched it all the way through, I'm curious to see if after watching the other two, it's going to have a different...
But you're watching the seasons in the correct order, right? I mean, you're watching season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, you're not starting at the end.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I don't know why. I just was like, I'm going to start with Voyager, and then I'm going to go DS9, and then I'm going to do TNG. I'm going to go from 1 to 7, but backwards.
There's no right or wrong way to do it. Whatever you want to do, it's fine. I think that's completely okay. And we've met people on this show who started watching Star Trek, Voyager season 6 was like the very first thing they ever saw. Or they never saw anything before the Kelvin movies, and then they started watching the rest of it.
Well, that makes sense to me. My sister was actually one of those people.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, there's a guy I interviewed. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I tried for years to get her to get into Star Trek with me, and I just couldn't. And then I think we talked a little bit about this on the last time, but then she went with me to see the first Kelvin film, and then she was like, okay, now I'm interested. Let's rewind and see those guys again in a different like kind of color.
There's a guy I saw, a guy I interviewed actually, who the first thing he saw was Strange New Worlds.
Wow.
Because he had a Paramount Plus subscription because he wanted to watch this Halo show, which is based on a video game that he used to play. So he was really big into Halo. So he's like, yeah, I want to watch Halo. And then he's like, I got 30 days left on the trial. What else do they got? And then he started watching Star Trek, and then he's like, I'm in. Inject this into my veins.
Which is funny because one of my good friends also, Strange New Worlds was her first as well. And so she called me and she's like, I really want to watch Strange New Worlds because I've been hearing some fantastic things about it, but do I need to watch Discovery? And I was like, if you want to watch Discovery, you could start and just watch season 2 and then go straight into Strange New Worlds and see how you feel about it. Because she was curious about the Pike, Spock, all the starting relationships. And she decided to just start with Strange New Worlds and then kind of go backwards as if it was like a prequel. And she's obsessed now. She's working her way through Discovery right now. So it's pretty fun to hear her thoughts.
I always tell people, I don't think Star Trek is particularly sensitive to spoilers or like in which order you watch it. It's just not.
No.
I've just interviewed so many people who started at the end or started watching in syndication when, there was some random episode that was on after a ball game. And, it's just, I don't think there's any rules about that. Yeah. But I am very strict when it comes to shows like Battlestar Galactica, which we talked about, the order you have to watch things. Like I will come after you, and swat you with a newspaper if you watch it out of order.
Galactica, I'm also because somebody came up to me recently and asked me about that show, and they had the second season on DVD, and I was like, no. I was like, you can't. It's not like
you cannot.
You can't. You won't know what's going on. I mean, you can know what's going on, but it's not going to have the same impact when you get to the end. I was like, you need to go back to the beginning.
And the number of people who start with 33 really irks me. because I tell them you cannot start with 33. Like you have to watch the miniseries.
Do people do that?
Because on some now this might be an artifact of how it's presented on some streaming networks.
Oh,
like the miniseries.
It's coming up as like a prequel or something.
Yeah, it's like in the movie section, or it's not laid out in the right order. I remember, I'm vaguely remembering something like this, Karin. I could be wrong, but I remembered there was some streaming network where it's like if you went to the show, it gave you the episodes and not the prequel, and you had to go someplace else to see the movies. So there was a lot of people. It was a popular. There's something about this. I'd have to Google it.
That sounds like I believe that would be true, because I remember I was watching them. I came into it. It was already on. It was on television, but I was coming into it like a season late. So I remember getting the DVDs, and I remember the guy at like Best Buy was like, "You need the miniseries DVDs too." Like he told me, he's like, "You need this and then this." Like he was very. He's like, "I see a fellow nerd. I'm going to put you on the right track." So I was safe.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I completely agree. But Paramount's been stepping in it these last few days. So
I know.
You've seen all the news, yeah?
Yes. I am concerned. I'm trying to stay optimistic. I'm also, but I'm concerned. It's funny because yesterday I planned a last-minute trip to visit my family in California, and they live in
nice.
They live in Los Angeles. So I'm going in like 2 weeks, and I'm thinking about walking with the writer's strike. If I can find them, I'm thinking maybe I need to start at Paramount. I'll go to Paramount for a day.
Go follow a bunch of the writers, and some of them are putting like where they're striking, and they're asking for people to come. I've seen the tweets.
Yeah.
So you can go find the Star Trek Prodigy writers. You can find because some of them have these writers' room accounts,
right?
And they're actually saying we're going to be all here, there, or some other place, and it's fantastic if you want to go. Yeah. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I hope Paramount can get it together. I really do, because they have such an opportunity where they are right now. They have such a great opportunity, and it would be horrible if they wasted it. That was fast.
All right. I told you the bathroom's right there. So all right. Yeah, Halls. That's the thing I love about
honey lemon ones.
What flavor are these? Sugar-free, cooling. Yes, honey lemon, sugar-free.
It's the best ones.
But my wife has put other ones in here that are imposters, so it's like a grab bag. I don't know. I'm having cough drop confusion.
Yeah, my partner gets these Dutch ones, and they look so sweet, because they come in this cute little green wrapper, but they taste. I don't even know. It's like pure menthol.
So that's the thing I've noticed, when you go to Europe, right? Because I've been a few times, and I'm sure as an American expatriate, you've experienced this. They have the same stuff, but it's like very different, like they said in Pulp Fiction, right?
Yes.
It's like you go to the pharmacy to buy like a thing, and it sort of looks like the same thing, but it's not quite, or it has like some added thing in it that you're not sure about, and it's like just navigating what you're supposed to buy can be very confusing.
The one thing that I always try to explain to my friends and family back home that they cannot understand here unless they come and visit me is Dutch mayonnaise. So the Dutch have something that they call mayonnaise. It is not what we call mayonnaise in the United States. Dutch mayonnaise.
What is it?
Dutch mayonnaise is it's sweet, and they dip their French fries in it. It's not like Heinz mayonnaise that has that sour taste. That's a completely different thing, and they have that in the store as well. And it's because it's an American thing. It says mayonnaise on it, but they hate that because to them it's not mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is what you eat with your French fries, and it should be sweet to counteract the salty of the French fry. And it's really wild. But the first time I came here, everybody's like, you have to have fries with mayonnaise. I was like, oh, mayonnaise. I am not a mayonnaise person.
No, absolutely not.
It's completely not the same thing. It's just has the same name.
So do you get the videos from that woman, Anna, on TikTok? She basically she's a vegetarian or possibly vegan, and she just sees other people eat food, and then she makes it and eats it, and it's just that.
Yes. Yeah, I have seen that.
And she's like very thin, right? Usually has like big glasses on. And every now and then, like you can just totally tell that she's in Europe because she doesn't talk much. She talks very, very little in her videos. Every now and then she'll say, oh, it's good, and you can hear a little accent. But like one time she was trying to put some kind of sauce on something, and it was in a toothpaste tube.
I was just like, had some.
Yeah, you whatever that is, you would not find that here.
So many things in Europe come in toothpaste tubes. You can get ketchup, you can get mustard, you can get mayonnaise. In Sweden, you can get caviar in a toothpaste tube. It's like for my Swedish family, it's a big deal. Like every time you go over for like holidays or something, they bring out this toothpaste tube of caviar.
Oh my God, that just doesn't seem appetizing to me at all.
Yeah, and they call it by the brand name, like we would call it Kleenex. They're just like,
yeah.
Who's bringing out the Kalis? And then automatically they're talking about this toothpaste tube of caviar.
The bandwidth and the runway to make the show like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. I always put in stupid aviation jokes and things like I got to stop saying runway because I don't know. I fly planes, so
I know. I love your plane videos. I love your plane videos.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, because my dad's a pilot. We talked. Yeah, okay. My dad's a pilot because he was. Yeah, because he was in the.
No, we didn't talk about this.
No, okay. Well, yeah, my dad's a pilot. Actually, both of my dads are a pilot. My dad and my stepdad were both pilots.
Okay.
My dad was in the military. He was a naval officer assigned to an Air Force squadron.
Oh, wow.
So he was a flight surgeon, and so he was.
Oh, wait, we did talk about this. Yeah.
And then my stepdad,
we did talk. I remember that.
My stepdad actually, he used to build airplanes, like smaller prop planes,
Ones that he could fly? I mean, like person-sized or models?
No, like person-sized. Yeah, he had a Piper Cub that he built himself.
Yep.
He
wow.
He actually, when he was like 15, he wanted to be a pilot, but he didn't have the money to pay for aviation lessons, and he lived close,
very expensive.
Yeah, he lived close to a small airport, and he walked over there, and he was like, "I want aviation lessons. I'll do it in exchange for I'll just come and work on the planes. Like I'll build stuff for you. I'll do the maintenance on the planes for you." And that was how he learned how to fly. He went and worked at the airport, and in exchange he got pilot lessons and eventually built his own Piper Cub.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, that video I just posted, I was really excited because for Father's Day, I just got an external mount for a second GoPro.
I saw it. I was like, oh, this is awesome because you had the one behind you and then you had the one in front.
Yeah, and it's like, cool. Even when you're in the cockpit, you don't get a view like that.
No.
Like you don't get to see just like the flat runway or just like flying over the desert because people really don't understand Vegas at all. Like once you leave the very edge of the city, you're on the surface of the moon.
Yes.
Like it is brown rock.
Yeah.
In every direction.
I used to live in Scottsdale, and we would drive. Drive up to Vegas, quite often, and there's nothing outside of there. You're just desert driving for a while.
Being vastly underprepared for where they were, and it was a typical case of like people thinking that the United States is like Europe, like it's small and there's like stuff in every direction. Like there's not.
No. It always surprises people when I used to tell them that I lived in Ohio for a while. And when I was living in Ohio, my sister was working down at Disney World in Florida, and they would say, "Oh, did you go and visit her?" And I was like, "Well, I went and visited her a couple of times, but that's a drive, so only a couple of times." And they're like, "Well, how much of a drive is that?" I'm like, "Well, that's like 17, 18 hours." And they were just like, if I drive 18 hours from here, I'm like coming up on Moscow, like.
Yeah.
They're like, what?
It's unbelievable. There's a Reddit forum, Ask an American. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but as a person living in Europe, you might find it entertaining. And there's this routine question that comes up again and again. It's one of those questions where everyone's like, oh my God, this again, right? Where some European is like, hey, I'm coming to America for the first time and I'm spending a week and I want to see Niagara Falls and I want to see the Alamo and Disneyland. And it's like, bro, you are doing one of those things.
Right, exactly.
You are doing one of those things if you are coming here for 7 days. Now, if you were coming here for a month, it'd be a different story.
Yeah, I always get people who say they want to do Route 66. And, having been born into a military family that moved a lot, I have done the Route 66 probably 6 times, but, not actually Route 66 because it'll take you forever if you actually are on Route 66. You get on the interstate and you look on the side and you see Route 66. And I'm just like, well, you need to prepare for that. That is a lot of sitting and a lot of just not much to see. A lot of just road.
And days and days and days.
And Texas never ends, so...
Weird.
This reminds me of right after my parents divorced, we were living in Arizona, and my mom's like, okay, we're moving to Ohio because she had a cousin living there, so it was kind of like family. And so my mom, my 2 sisters, and me in the car, packed full with the dog and the cat. We're driving across country. We're in New Mexico, and my mom is not paying attention to the gas because she's just trying to get as far as possible. She looks at the gas and realizes, like, we're on fumes, basically. We're running on fumes. Like, there's like nothing left. The lights are on, and we are like in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing. It's just desert. So she starts cruising and just kind of like keeping her fingers crossed. She's like, if you guys see anything, it's just straight desert. We see nothing. She's like, just tell me if you see anything. So I'm sitting in the front seat. I was like, I see a sign up ahead that said like that there was a town coming up. There's like this exit for this town. And she's like, great. Because there's one of those signs that says like, motel, gas, food.
Yeah.
It looked like an old sign, but my mom was like, well, it's an exit. We're getting off. We get off. It's a ghost town. It's like there are buildings, but there's nothing. Like there's a gas station that probably hasn't seen life since the 50s. Like it was just
oh my God,
completely deserted. And all my mom could think of is like, oh, there's probably people hiding in here waiting for people to get off the exit. They're just going to like steal our car. They're going to steal all of our stuff. So she's like speeding the car around, getting back on the highway.
Is this your superhero origin story as a crime writer?
Yeah. And then we just lucked out because we get back on the road, and we literally get to the point where like the car is crawling. It can barely go any farther. And out of nowhere, giant casino. Just massive
nice.
Casino, massive like gas station with like 20 like tank. Like it was insane. And it was just, my mom was just like, I will never not look at the gas tank ever again. I don't think she's ever let the gas tank go under half since that.
In upstate Nevada, there's a highway called the Loneliest Highway. You can Google it; it'll come up. It literally has a point. It actually has a point of no return sign.
Oh my!
When you're driving down this road, it says if you go beyond this sign, you cannot turn back. You will not make it. You have to continue to the next town. Like that's how bad it is. And there's a town in the middle of it.
I was born in Nevada, so this might be my origin story. Maybe I'm from this road.
I don't know. It's Austin, Nevada, is this town of 200 people. That's like the only civilization, such as it is, right. Is the only thing that is on this road between the two extreme points of it. And if you go to the website for Austin, Nevada, it says Austin, Nevada is extremely rural and remote. Bring anything you might want if you come here. There is a gas station and there's a little like motel and, there's civilization. I mean, you can eat, there's a little restaurant. I mean, but it's a town of 200 people,
right.
You can't go to the Walmart. No. You know what I mean? Anyway, we are here to talk about some Star Trek. I think we should get into it.
We should talk Trek.
We should. This is a Star Trek podcast after all, but I do oftentimes have diversions, and I'm always of two minds because that all that stuff's going to go in the bonus material, but sometimes people tell me the bonus material is their favorite part of the show, and I never quite know how to feel about that.
I don't know. I think it's fun because you like to hear the Star Trek stuff. You like to see like, do I connect on the same level with this person, or did they have the same feelings about that episode as I did? But then in the bonus material, you hear like people are relaxed. It's just kind of natural, like regular conversation. We're not thinking too hard about your answers, maybe. So that could be it. But I think the whole show
you don't have to. Oh, thank you. You know what? I just finished editing.
I like the M5. I'm an M5 fan.
Do you have anything to say about that M5?
This pleases the M5.
Yeah.
Sometimes my guests have listened to my episodes and sometimes they haven't, which is okay. I don't, I'm not judgy about that. But she was unsure if like, is it okay to be sad?
Yeah.
And I was like, sister, you do what you want to do. We get all kinds on the show. We get people who are super happy. We get people who, have, or basically trying to buy out the Kleenex. It's whatever is appropriate is for you is the right thing.
But I think that's the thing with Star Trek is Star Trek hits all of the emotions. And I think for people who have been fans for a long time, Star Trek hits all of your emotions at every point in your life at some time. And so I think like that's the cool thing about listening to Star Trek fans share their experience is that, you get sad, you get angry, but you also get joy and happiness. So Star Trek hits everything. I mean, it's life. So
and the number of life-altering and life-changing decisions that people have made in their lives because of the show, it's amazing, and I don't think Star Trek has matched that. I could be wrong. I'm open to having my mind changed on it, but it's something I'm thinking about. I don't know if you want to say anything about that or not.
No, I mean, I would agree. I think that Star Trek has done that in a way that other fandoms have not, because when it started, it it in a sense predicted a bunch of social, cultural, technological movements. And then we saw that come true as a generation. And then we saw ourselves reflected in the characters and facing some of the same controversies or issues that the characters were facing in our own life, because the writers were so good at reflecting real world in the Star Trek universe. And yeah, I think that's just something that people connect with. But then also, I feel like the Star Trek community, not just the fans, but the people involved in the shows, the actors, the writers, they are all close with each other. You know, I've been seeing a lot of people, because there's been a lot of conventions going on recently, a lot of things coming up, and I see a lot of people connecting with, you know, the actors from Strange New Worlds on Twitter, on TikTok, and you see the actors responding as if these are people that they have known their entire life. And I feel like that Star Trek just brings you together in that community in a way that other fandoms don't.
Anyway, he's on this thing now about TNG scants, right? You know, the scant uniform, right? So he's like cataloging every appearance of a scant in TNG, because there's the thing about scants now. Yeah. And there's this one episode where a character is running down the hall and like knocks into a female officer wearing a scant, and it knocks the skirt up. And he's like, and I believe, he says, you know, he's very serious with the stuff, I believe this is the first appearance of scanties. Because you can see them. I was like, did you just say scanties? I literally seized up and I got the biggest belly laugh.
I mean, it might be the first appearance of it in The Next Generation, but it definitely appeared in TOS. Because I remember that was the reason why my mom said we have to use the figure skating uniform when we make your Uhura dress, because there was an episode in TOS where, I don't know if it was Uhura, but it was somebody, and the skirt lifted up and you could see that there was a part underneath. So my mom was like, we're just going to make it like it's a bathing suit with a skirt that goes around.
Now, see, this is a question for the nerds. I have never heard of the TOS uniform referred to as a scant.
I haven't either.
I'd heard it referred to as the TOS dress. People have said that.
Yeah, I haven't.
But I've never heard the term
scant either. But they're very similar, especially if they both have the scanties.
Oh. I will put a link up to that tweet in the show notes because it's hilarious. If I see like everybody picking option B or something, it wasn't a good question in my opinion. So I always like to try to make it that you can pick any of them. So we'll see how we do.
I'm glad I got the Barclay question because I really love Barclay.
A lot of people do. He's a great character. Do you remember Broughton Forrester?
This is the publisher from The Doctor, from the AMH, right? Or
that's right, from the episode Author. This is the Bolian publisher of his Hollow novels.
That was a fantastic episode. I do love that episode.
I do too. Some people don't like it, but I enjoyed it a lot. I think it tried to do a little too much in one episode. I think it could have been broken apart. I think there was some issues there, but I do enjoy the effort, and I really enjoy the Bolians anytime we get to see them.
One of the things I love about Star Trek that I am always paying attention to is I'm always paying attention to if somebody in the universe mentions a book or a piece of writing that's in universe. And I really like Voyager because Voyager does this a lot. Like there are many episodes where B'Elanna talks about the Klingon romance that she's reading, and the people mention like some Vulcan books, like Vulcan fiction novels that are on the holodecks and stuff. And I really love it when somebody brings up fiction inside fiction. I think it's very meta.
Boom diggity, we're done. Was that okay?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
So I think that the audio is going to be fine this time. I don't know what happened like internally on your computer last time because it was really weird. Yeah,
it was weird because I kept working on it too, and I sent it to a friend of mine who does podcasts, and he couldn't get it to change either. So I think it was a combination of the headphones being wireless and the QuickTime just being possessed.
Yeah, something really weird was happening because I have never had it before where I could hear you and see you fine in the recording. Like, because I have that recording quality, but is very bad in the backup recordings that Squadcast does are incredibly poor quality, and I don't get separate tracks. I just get one file, so
you can't
it wasn't something.
Things.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable sending that out. It wouldn't have been good. And I always feel like I want to put my best in the best positive light, you know, and because you only really get one shot on being on the show, you know. So I want it to be really good, and hopefully get some interest for you in your books and stuff. So it just didn't work out. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity for you to come back on and re-record with me.
This has been so much fun. I really love it. Even doing it a second time, I'm like, this is so great. I just love talking about Star Trek.
As all of us do, right? I mean, there's people, Star Trek podcasting is kind of like a little bit addictive. Yeah. People get into it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I was a guest on a podcast. Then you get invited on another podcast to be a guest, and they're like, yeah, I'll do that. And then you're like, well, I got invited to be on another podcast, and next thing you know, you're doing your own show.
If it works out and Star Trek takes notice, and they're just like, oh, here's an author who's on all these Star Trek podcasts. Maybe she wants to write a book. That would be great.
That would be great, right? Yeah, you'd be game. Fantastic. All right. Well, I know it's late for you, so thank you very much.
I'm going to try to send this to you. I'll wait for like 30 seconds.